Welcome to Genshin Literature, the show where you get to listen to some of the beautiful writing from both the creators and the players of Genshin Impact. I'm your host, the Unlikely Genshin Gamer, or you could think of me as the Unlikely Genshin Narrator for now. If you or someone you know would like to be featured on the show, or would like to make a game content request, check out the links in the description. Thank you for your support, and enjoy! Today's episode features the wondrous dragonair, Sigewinne. Within the huge undersea facilities of the fortress of Meropide, Sigewinne's infirmary is one of the few places open to all people at all times. A guard might have a terrible bout of illness while out on patrol at night and have to be helped over to the infirmary by his colleagues, only to find that a hot drink and a clean bed had already been prepared, awaiting his arrival. Or an exhausted inmate might collapse from overexertion at their lunch desk, then awake to find their meal by their bedside, snug within an insulated container. As they made these discoveries, Sigewinne's smile would also come into view, swiftly relieving both fright and fatigue, helping them to calm down and accept treatment and care. All are in awe of her dedication, yet are also puzzled by the warmness of her heart. To be consigned to the fortress is a punishment in and of itself. And even the most youthful and energetic of guards must take a day off after consecutive days of work. Yet, Sigewinne has taken precious few of these throughout Wriothesley's entire tenure as administrator. The lights in the infirmary are always on, and it seems they'll never be put out. The motivation behind such enthusiasm may as well be an enigma to guard and inmate alike. Could it be that she's an emissary sent from the heavens to watch over us? What began as a single inmate mumbling away to themselves after seeing the wings on Sigewinne's back was swiftly taken up by others, until, before long, the vast majority were behind it. In this world without light beneath the waves, she had become their sun, bringing a radiant warmth to their dark, damp prison. To repay this angel for her care, the guards have an unwritten rule beyond the many administrative systems already present. Any who are rude to Sigewinne are punished extra harshly. The inmates, for their part, also have an unspoken agreement that any particularly wild and violent newcomers must receive a warning upon being admitted. After all, they had to be made aware that the community would brook no affront to their angel, didn't they? Sigewinne herself is blissfully unaware of all these customs that have cropped up around her, and simply serves her patients as she always has. However, there will always be some curious person who will ask, "Head nurse, why do you stay here to take care of us? Don't you get tired or, annoyed?" Whenever this happens, Sigewinne's brows tend to furrow, a rare sight indeed, as though the question was absurd. Have you ever had a pet cat? You take care of them and watch them be cute in their various ways. That's something that makes you happy in and of itself, isn't it? Why would anyone get tired of something like that? Most who ask cannot quite believe their ears when they receive such an answer, and those they tell are even less convinced. Nonsense, if ever I heard it. I'd sooner believe that angels exist. In the days just following Sigewinne's appointment to the post of head nurse, the fortress saw many instances of inmates overworking themselves. Even without being ordered to do so, many would persist in working when rest times rolled around. Perhaps they were simply looking for a faster way to get their hands on temporary luxuries to lavish upon themselves, or place another bet in the next boxing match. Either way, the credit coupons caused many an inmate to sacrifice their health in pursuit of their desires. Seeing all this confused Sigewinne, yet she was unable to do anything about it. The way she saw it, exhaustion was an illness that humans actively sought to afflict themselves with. But since it's an illness, I could come up with a cure, couldn't I? So thinking, she began sourcing for ingredients, eventually coming up with a type of medicine that was to her satisfaction. Both packed full of nutrition and delicious, in her eyes it was a surefire winner. Yet, when she first tried to use it, the inmate she was treating blanched in terror at the sight and refused to take it. Bewildered by this reaction, Sigewinne sought help from many sources, eventually receiving her answer from the inmate who served as head chef. Sounds like a piece of cake to me. We chefs can turn anything into a gourmet dish, even the ugliest looking roots and rhizomes around. Though she found herself disagreeing with his definition of ugly, Sigewinne was grateful for the head chef's help, and so she showed him the ingredients she had prepared. There was a long silence as the head chef looked over the items before him. Head nurse, I will do my best. Oh, and if you don't mind, next time you send me the ingredients, don't let anyone see them, alright? Sigewinne did not understand why he was so worried, but seeing his earnest gaze, she agreed. Afterwards, she was to give this medicine the official name of Nutritious Meal, and thus did it become one of the secret menu items at the canteen, one that would inevitably show up on an inmate's tray the day after they overworked themselves. After Sigewinne became head nurse, the fact that she looked like a human yet was actually a melusine became an open secret, and the news spread even beyond the fortress's walls. Some guessed that she might be a descendant of mixed human and melusine blood, but any who discussed this possibility would receive a stern warning from the Marechaussee Phantom. Even Iudex Neuvillette would personally come out against such rumors, with the intent to squash such inappropriate, discourteous canards. Some guessed that she might be wearing a special mask and gloves, postulating that this made it easier for her to blend in with humanity. But most quickly refuted this belief, for the time when humans had ostracized melusines was now far behind them. There was no need for Sigewinne to live in this way. Newspapers quickly seized upon the selling power of this public curiosity, and many reporters were dispatched to the fortress to interview her. Forgive me for asking, but might we know how you came to look the way you do? The reporters' tactful approaches belied their urgency. Sigewinne, after giving the question some serious thought, began to tell a story woven from distant memories. In the times when humans and melusines did not yet trust one another, only one little girl was willing to make friends with a melusine. Later, when she fell seriously ill, Sigewinne was the only doctor who was able to make it on time. But because she was a melusine, and only because of that, the girl's parents did not allow Sigewinne to enter. To save her friend, Sigewinne looked for a frightening witch and begged her to help. Having ascertained Sigewinne's resolve, the witch gave her a bottled potion of brewed sin. After using it, Sigewinne gained a human countenance, hands and feet, and by doing so, managed to save her friend. Having listened to this story, the reporters glanced at each other. Head nurse, this is a fairy tale, isn't it? It's true, you know. They looked into the Melusine's eyes, then back at each other. Each of them was among the elite of their profession, and they all believed that they could see through an interviewee's lies with ease. Yet there was no trace of falsehood in Sigewinne's expression. And so it was that they returned in vain. Perhaps there was consensus that the public would not be convinced by the story, for Sigewinne's answer was never published. Afterward, those around her came to believe that this was a matter she had no wish to discuss, and thus they privately agreed that no one was to ask her again. Perhaps only Sigewinne herself knows that she had hidden nothing, though she might not have understood the full truth at the time. Ever since entering the fortress, Sigewinne has maintained a correspondence with Neuvillette via letters. She responds earnestly to every letter he sends, and out of concern for the possible boredom that he might have to endure in the Palais Mermonia, she sometimes even includes anecdotes about some interesting things that have happened at the fortress. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, I am doing very well right now. I received the medical items in a shipment a while back. Thank you very much for selecting them and arranging for their arrival. Something quite interesting happened recently. A newly arrived youngster brought down an old bully who's been throwing his weight around for a long time now. He was injured in the process though. He's very young indeed, but he's tougher than any adult I've met so far. He even refused anesthetics when I was stitching his wound, saying that he wanted to keep his head clear. Neuvillette's reply that time came a good while earlier than usual. He seemed to have recognized the young man Sigewinne had mentioned and requested that she took close care of him. Although he wrote in the same officialese as usual, Sigewinne could sense that he was following this young man with interest. As such, matters concerning this young man would become a common feature of her letters to Neuvillette. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, he has injured himself in a fight again and refused anesthetics as always. I snuck some into his tea anyway, stitching him up after he fell asleep. He never cries out when I treat him, but I know how painful it must be for him. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, he still refuses to drink the milkshakes I make for him, even though they do him a lot of good. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, he has grown quite a bit. Perhaps he might even be a little taller than you are now. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, the medical supplies that I reported as missing in my previous letter have now been found, thanks to him. It seems that there are no longer any secrets that may be kept from him down here. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, based on your previous instructions, I am to address him as Your Grace now, yes? Many years later, after the young man named Wriothesley had become the new administrator of the fortress, through some coincidence he discovered Sigewinne and Neuvillette's status as pen pals. Just as I thought, our dear Udex placed a spy by my side. Why do you say that? I only mentioned you in my letters because Monsieur Neuvillette was concerned about you. Wriothesley did not agree with this, but he did not refute it directly, instead choosing to talk about a certain encounter from before he went to prison. At that time, racked with hunger, he had been flipping through a discarded newspaper, searching for some opportunity to make Mora. However, the one he had met was not the concerned Monsieur Neuvillette, but rather a warm-hearted Melusine officer. It was only thanks to the food she gave him that he managed to make it through at all. The Iudex does not, or to be precise, he cannot show concern for anyone. This is one of the restrictions he must accept as the Iudex. Even his subordinates are freer than he is to show concern for others. Nonetheless, do continue writing to him about anything you like. I suppose that is one of the restrictions I must accept. Sigewinne, too, did not attempt to refute Wriothesley's view, even as he left, for she had never imagined that he, despite everything he knew, could come to such an incorrect conclusion. Long ago, when the Melusines had just come up to the surface world, many of them would present gifts to humanity as gestures of goodwill. Yet this was exploited by evil folk, bringing danger upon many Melusines. Thus it was that Neuvillette gathered them all, strictly prohibiting such behavior. If it were not for Neuvillette's express instructions, that Melusine officer would never have given Wriothesley any food herself. After much deliberation, Sigewinne decided to pen a new letter. Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, I have finally found a secret that even he does not know. As far as Melusines are concerned, humans aging, falling ill, and dying is as natural as the sunrise and sunset. This is the first thing all Melusines understand in their attempts to understand humans, for it is the biggest difference between them. Many Melusines' understanding of humanity also stops here, for what they faced when they came onto land was human weariness and rejection. So they returned to the waters, giving up on further investigation into the transient lot that is humanity's. Unlike these Melusines, Sigewinne's curiosity bid her stay, and also alerted her to the magic of the science of medicine. It was said that this magic was quite marvelous, even able to change the natural law known as death by age and ailment. Sigewinne wished to master this magic, believing that it might help bridge the chasm between Melusines and humans, allowing the former to blend in with the latter. Unfortunately, in the days when Melusines had first entered society, none among the humans understood her thought process, and even less so were they willing to impart medical skills onto her. This persisted until a traveling doctor, who the children called the Witch, encountered the Melusine and heard her out. Seriously, what do you think medicine is? How childish. Sigewinne was expecting to be rejected, even as she silently bore the criticism, only for the witch to scare off a few children who were looking to ridicule the Melusine, before waving her to follow. Might as well come with me then. I'll show you what the real answer is. Thus did Sigewinne come to own her very own medical kit, learning medicine at the feet of this witch. The latter was an excellent doctor and a dutiful teacher alike. There was almost no illness that she could not cure, no technique she could not teach. As their travels gradually took them all across Fontaine, Sigewinne had already learned how to prepare various medicines as well as scare off children with ghost stories, and she would also call this witch her teacher. One day, this traveling doctor of a witch would stop her wandering feet, and with a serious expression that seemed somewhat out of character, called Sigewinne over to assist her. What shall we use to cure this person, teacher? There is no cure. Just give them some painkillers. This was the first time Sigewinne had ever heard her teacher make such a pronouncement. Though shocked, she prepared the relevant substance nonetheless. Then she watched as the suffering patient calmed down, said their farewells to their family members before passing on peacefully. In the night, the two of them would continue their journey. I didn't know there were illnesses you could not cure, teacher. Are there more of them? Oh, lots. No matter how advanced medicine becomes, there will always be incurable illnesses. Then why does medicine exist? All humans will die. In which case, why do humans exist? Replied the witch. Hearing her teacher's response, Sigewinne teetered on the edge of understanding. She thought back to the farewells they had seen earlier, rifling through her memories for an answer. For their smiles? Their tears? Her teacher, ever serious, suddenly gave her a rare, gentle smile. Let's leave it at that for now. Once you've figured it out, not only will you understand medicine, but humanity as well. Fontainians were originally oceanids, and their bodies will dissolve in primordial seawater. That great flood washed away the sins of all Fontainians and revealed the shocking truth at the same time. Of this matter, Sigewinne had a far greater understanding than most. After settling the inmates injured in the flood, she returned to the fortress ahead of time and took out that letter, sealed securely in a bottle as it had been for hundreds of years. I assume that if you're opening this letter, you've understood all those things I had doubts about, just as we agreed. No matter, I know I need not worry. You've always done as I said, trusting me unconditionally. As such, allow me to open with an apology. I lied to you, even at the end. The strange illness I discovered manifests as the dissolution of the human body. All bodily tissues and structures will dissipate, leaving behind a liquid that appears as close to pure water as might seem possible. Even by using myself as an experimental subject and forcing myself into a fatal impasse, I could not find the answer to curing the disease in this liquid. All I gained was one meaningless discovery: that if you mix this liquid with some specific ingredients, you will obtain a face-changing solution, usable by Fontainians alone. With this solution, they can change their appearance into anything they desire. I originally thought it useless until you found me and told me of your dilemma, of being unable to save your friend due to being a melusine. It suddenly occurred to me that it might also have some effect on the melusine constitution, and that this predicament I found myself at may yet have some purpose. That is why I tricked you. The bottle on the table is not some sort of mysterious potion, but the final gift I can leave you after I have dissolved myself. Just take it as a sort of medicine. After all, didn't I tell you that we had to be willing to resort to trickery to get children to drink theirs? Having finished reading the letter, Sigewinne returned to the place she had chosen to memorialize her teacher, now armed with the full truth. There was no gravestone here, only an unremarkable water's edge. Sigewinne had never found her teacher's body, and so had set up a simple cenotaph for her. Hundreds of years later, the monument had in turn been swallowed up by the constantly rising waters. Sigewinne did not begrudge her teacher that lie, for she could feel the warmth in it each time she touched her cheeks. Thank you, teacher. And she laid that letter upon the waters and watched it drift far away. In the days before the main body of the Fontaine Research Institute had yet to float into the skies, the researchers would also accept some research projects that lay outside the scope of their usual investigations, as a way to repay their benefactors. These projects were largely dry, uninteresting, but tolerable sacrifices for the sake of courting sponsors. Still, some would be outright ridiculous, to the point that the researchers might consider having their funding cut to be preferable to actually carrying them out. One day, one such task appeared, finding pride of place on their announcement boards. Extra urgent, specialist medical device development. Requirements: 1. Portable, small size, lightweight, to be carried with ease by a person with the build of a small child. 2. Needs to contain all needed medical implements for emergency calls. If present medical instruments cannot meet these requirements, a new complement of devices will need to be created separately. 3. Contains a function with which to perform routine health checkups. 4. Must have a cute design. Those who had gathered around the board to read this began to scrunch up their brows as they did so, and finally they could not contain their anger any longer. What sort of request is this? Never mind how strict the requirements are, they're self-contradictory too. A cute design? What are we, toy makers? But the person who had put up the notice was unfazed by their infuriated response. The commissioner is the Melusine-Head nurse at the fortress of Meropide. At this, the researchers, who just moments before had been the very picture of outrage, fell utterly silent, until finally someone shouted out, "We're bidding for this one! No preferential treatment for those on shift. Also, anyone who complained just now is automatically out of the running." After just a single month, Sigewinne had received a most satisfactory product. From then on, this heart-shaped medical kit could be seen at her hip wherever she went, indeed becoming one of her calling cards. If she had but one complaint, it would have to be its awful mouthful of a name: the Melusine-Specialized Portable Integrated Medical Apparatus. Sigewinne is a most skilled medical practitioner indeed. Since entering the fortress of Meropide, she has almost never encountered an illness she could not treat. And as the number she has saved has increased, so too has everyone's respect for her. As long as it's medical advice she gives, they will follow it to the letter. Still, there was one exception. This was an inmate by the name of Oldstone, whose real name no one knew. They knew only that he had been serving his sentence for many years already, coming to spend his twilight years beneath the waves on account of its sheer length. His body grew more and more frail, but he would always reject treatment from Sigewinne. "Don't bother me. No one can cure me." With such words, he would refuse her each time she tried to give him a checkup. Eventually, she was forced to make use of her connections with the prison administration, calling upon the aid of several guards to drag those old stony bones into the infirmary. Thus did the long overdue physical examination begin. But the result was one of despair. The old fellow's condition had long since been terminal, and was not something that Sigewinne could treat for all her skill. "See, I told you so." Oldstone crowed in triumph as he looked into her defeated eyes, only for his laughter to turn into a bout of intense choking and bloody coughing, until finally he lost consciousness. After this, the arrogant old fellow was rendered bedridden. And for the first time, Sigewinne found herself feeling trapped in that now so familiar infirmary, not knowing what to do aside from watch over Oldstone as his final days slipped away. Still, she noticed that he would constantly stare at a specific date on the calendar, some strange light stubbornly lingering in those long, deadened eyes of his. No matter how advanced medicine becomes, there will always be incurable illnesses. And why does medicine exist? Sigewinne remembered the question she once asked her teacher, and suddenly realized that she might now pen the final annotation of her answer. So she came to Oldstone's bedside and once again extended an invitation to him. My teacher once told me that a doctor's greatest duty is not to cure all diseases, but to cure the ones they can. So let me help you. You're saying there's something wrong with me that you can treat? That's right. It's your inability to last till that day comes. He stared back at her in shock, but was ultimately won over by the resolve in her eyes. In the following 10 or so days, despite his unwillingness, he drank every last concoction she gave him. His condition did not improve, and indeed his bloody coughing only increased in intensity and volume. But by some miracle, he made it past the date of the death sentence his disease had passed upon him, and made it to that day on the calendar. On that day, a mother and her son showed up at the infirmary. The son had been plying his trade as a merchant in Liyue, and this was the earliest he could hurry back to Fontaine. He first upbraided Oldstone for his failure as a father. Then, upon receiving the old man's earnest apology, soaked the sickbed's sheets with his tears, before finally sending Oldstone off with a smile when that final moment came. After Oldstone's funeral, Sigewinne received a box of thank you gifts from that mother and son. Just as she was about to pass them on to her patients, her eyes came upon something shiny. And what was it but a brand new vision? As if the gods themselves had seen all her deeds and sent her a gift of their own as well. Still, she did not display too much joy or surprise, instead taking this as just another annotation for her answer. How she wished her teacher were here in this moment. That way she could submit her answer at last. For the smiles and tears on their faces. Thank you for listening to Genshin Literature. Please like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed yourself. And I'll see you in the next one.